Welcome to the Trading with Venus podcast, where we help you establish strong trading habits, generate consistent profits, and create the lifestyle you desire for yourself and your family. Now your host, Raman Gill.
Welcome to Trading with Venus podcast session 2. In this week's episode, we have a special guest for you. Chris Capre will be joining us to discuss his journey in Forex trading and his philosophy around becoming a profitable Forex trader. Chris is a Buddhist, trader, and a philanthropist. He is a fund manager and has over 15 years of trading experience.
So welcome, Chris, to the show. Thank you so much for taking the time to meet with us today.
My pleasure.
First of all, can you tell us a bit about yourself? Because we'd love to get to know you personally.
Yeah, so I have been trading for 15 years now. I actually had no prior training in financial markets, economics, or business. Ironically, I studied neuroscience and East Asian philosophy. And I remember in my college years thinking to myself, when I had to choose some electives, one of the options was like a business class. And I thought, oh my God, I would never take that. Why would I want to do that? I have no interest in that. And ironically, here I am, 15 years later, and this is what I do for my profession. It seems to be the story of my life that a lot of things I said I would never do, I end up doing somehow and end up enjoying them. So I had studied and graduated with my studies in neuroscience and Asian philosophy. My specialty was human learning and memory, particularly increasing cognitive performance. And in East Asian philosophy, my specialty was on mostly Buddhism and Eastern religion. But, after college, I didn't want to be in a lab, working in a neuroscience lab, and I didn't want to be a philosophy professor. So I, was looking at different options, and I started training in yoga and shortly after meditation. And within 6 months, I became a yoga teacher. And a year, I was initiated as a yoga teacher. And it was during that time that I had met somebody who was a client of mine. I was teaching in Coronado, which is an island just off of San Diego. It's a kind of a wealthy community. And someone had come into my class, and he was with his wife, and he was bald, and I could tell, just based on his appearance that he had cancer. And afterwards, they came up and started talking to me, and they wanted me to work with them privately to be his private yoga instructor. He felt like, he had terminal cancer. He knew he had somewhere between 3 and 5 years to live, but he wanted his body to at least feel good during the process, and he knew that yoga could help his immune system a little bit, so why not? So I ended up working with him privately. His name was Philip, and this kind of, what happened is he one day asked me a question, and just kind of came up to me as I was at his house. And he said, when are you going to get a real job? And I said, what do you mean? I'm teaching yoga and working with clients like you. And he said, no, you're good. He's like, don't get me wrong. You're very talented, but you can't, live in pajamas the rest of your life and that for your work. He's like, you're too talented. You're too smart. You should be doing other things. So he hands me a book, and he says, I just read this book. And he's like, I don't know why. I had a feeling you should read this book. He's like, some reason I think you should do this. And it was a very strange feeling, at that moment for somebody to tell me that, not that I didn't, have moments like that or certain synchronicities like that or serendipity moments like that. But, there was a certain energy and feeling about what he was saying. So I took the book, and it was a book about a guy who was an athlete in college who ends up becoming a currency trader by some strange circumstance. And he became one in Asia. And after reading the book, I started to investigate it, currency trading. I was already, involved in the markets, and I was involved in mutual funds, some basic stocks, but nothing really on a trading level. And after reading the book, I started looking online and opened up a demo account. Actually, I tried to look online, but back then in 2000, there was only like 8 websites out there in currency trading, which now there's thousands. So to give you an idea of how the market was different, how the environment was different back then. And I went to local Borders, and I found some magazines on trading, and they had something on getting a free demo with GFT. And so I got one and downloaded the platform, and the moment I turned on the platform, I just looked at the platform and something communicated to me, you know this. This is familiar to you. You understand this. Which is weird because I had no prior training into it, but everything made sense. I could understand the language. I could understand all the terminology that they were saying on there. I understood kind of what everything meant, even though I had no training whatsoever. And after a month of demo trading, I went live and never looked back. I've been trading live every day since then. And so, in terms of getting to know me personally or who I am, I'm a Buddhist, I'm a trader, and I'm a philanthropist. And so that basically means that I meditate, I trade, and I donate. That's what I do, and that's kind of the story of my life. And if I could add in one more thing in there, it would be that I train, and not just train people, but I train myself. I constantly am training. And so if I had to sum up 4 words to describe my life, it would be trade, train, meditate, and donate. So that's me, and that's kind of how I got into trading.
Can you actually talk a bit about, you just mentioned training. So how do you train yourself? Or what is it that you're training yourself on?
So for the last 15 years, I've been practicing meditation every day. To give you an idea of training, beyond that being my daily practice and my daily morning routine, right now for the month of June, there's a thing in the Buddhist world called Sangdawa, and it's a period that Buddhists all over the world tend to be engaged in very heavy practice. They kind of mark it not necessarily as the historical dates, but celebrate the birth, life, and death of the first Buddha. And so the one that we know is Gautama Buddha or Siddhartha. So I am actually on meditation retreat right now. And so that means I have way more intensive practice requirements. I have what are called retreat parameters, which means that there's certain things that I am doing and certain things that I'm not doing. I practice at very specific times. I have very specific practices that are outlined by my teacher. And, I'm doing the equivalent of 4 times my normal daily practice. So if you can imagine what it would be like if you had a daily exercise routine and then all of a sudden one day you flip a switch and now it's 4 times more intense than what you had before, that's kind of what I'm going through right now. So I've done a 1-year meditation retreat back in 2011 in Uruguay, and that was in a small town just outside of Punta del Este. And so in terms of training, there are 3 main areas that I train myself. I train myself in my meditation practice, which is something that obviously benefits the mind. The science is out there, about how meditation benefits the mind. Helps with, decreased heart rate, better immune levels, better, lower stress levels, happiness, less stress hormones in the body, increases gray matter in the prefrontal cortex while reduces gray matter in, say, the amygdala, which is our fight, what triggers our fight or flight mechanism. So the meditation is out there, and that's one thing I'm training in every day, but now I'm doing that more intensely. I also train in terms of the markets, not just in my live trading, but I also do a lot of simulation trading. And that's a lot of testing of absorbing particular price action patterns and training in them on execution and recognizing certain patterns and environments and constantly testing myself offline, because the markets can't be your only testing field. Just like for a football player, they don't only test or train themselves in a live game. They have to train themselves offline, and that's during practice. So I do that as well. And I use certain neuroplastic or neuroscientific techniques to help increase cognitive performance. And then on top of that, I train people in these techniques as well. So when you ask the question about training, those would be the examples of how I train myself.
Thank you, Chris. Now, in terms of trading, we all go through our trading journeys. Can you tell us a bit about your trading journey? Was there a time when you felt like you actually failed in trading? So tell us a bit about that and how you got past that and still continue on. Yeah.
So as I said before, I started in 2000. I really didn't start trading, on an active basis until about 2001. And that was from FX. Now it's expanded to global indices, commodities, I've CFDs. I've really kind of expanded the instrument base. But in terms of was there a moment that I felt like I failed. Yeah, it was 6 months in. So when I started, I had a very abnormal, I guess you can say, start with live trading, which is that I started off on a 6-month win streak. And I don't mean that I won all the time, but I was just winning an abnormal amount of time. You know, we're talking 70, 80 plus, sometimes 90% of my trades were wins. And back then I really didn't understand as much about risk management, so I was trading a lot larger positions than I should have been, which worked to my advantage during that time period because I'd taken a $3,000 account. I literally, all the money I had, put it into account. And within 6 months, that account was $83,000. So that was the beginning, and that took me 6 months to do that. But then, in terms of the period that I failed, it happened right then and there, where I lost $25,000 in 15 minutes, and by the end of that month, I lost $50,000. And that kind of set off a 4-month just losing streak and drawdown period, where most of what I had made from that 3 to 83 was now gone. I was still in profit at the end of the year. I still made a decent profit, but almost all of that was gone in a period of 4 months. And I definitely consider that in part of it a failure because I realized in that moment that there were certain training and tools that I didn't have. There were many things about the market that I was very naive about and didn't understand. Particularly, the two most important things were risk management and trading psychology. Or I wouldn't even call it trading psychology. I call it trading mindset. Really understanding how the mindset affects our performance. And there were many days that I couldn't even get up off the couch. You know, I was just sitting there staring out the window. I was so kind of taken aback and just kind of stunned by what had happened that it was such a shock to me at that time. And it had brought up, the good thing about it, that even though it was a massive failure, it started to show me things about myself, my mindset, my thinking about money, my thinking about success, my thinking about my mindset and self-image about confidence and handling money. All those things came to the surface. And so, until I was able to really look at those and start to deal with those and transform those and tackle those things, that I wasn't really able to do anything well in the markets. It was just a constant losing streak. It was just losing way too many trades and barely winning any and winning small amounts when I did. And so the account just kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller. All those wins just started going away and evaporating real fast. And so, yeah, that would be a period where I would definitely felt like, oh yeah, that was a failure in terms of my moment, in terms of my trading process. I think the next part of your question was, how did I get out of that, or was there an aha moment? Is that the next question?
The next question was, how did you get past that?
Yeah, so it was kind of an ironic situation. One day I decided to go for a walk, and it was like a decently sunny day, and within 10 minutes or 5 minutes of getting going for the walk, it just started to rain. And some part of that I was thinking, like, God, this is so descriptive of my life, and so I'm walking and I'm just totally, beating myself up and really not feeling well and not doing well based on just the losses and everything that I experienced. And you're in a bad situation, or you're not doing well when a homeless person walks by you and asks you a question, hey, are you okay? And so that's literally what happened. I looked that bad that they were asking me. This was a person who had no home, no place to live. I had a home. I had a place to live. I had money in the bank. I had, I still had my yoga teaching available to me if I wanted to really do that full time. And here was somebody who didn't have any of those things available, and they were asking me if I was okay. So obviously I was in a really just bad state of, appearance and mind. And I walked into the park, and I was kind of just really thinking about this. I'm like, no, I'm obviously not okay, and I need to get out of this. I need to get past this. I need to transform this. And someone was there in the rain in the park, and they were practicing Taichi. And they must have been doing it for a really long time, because they were doing some advanced movements and things that I had never seen in Taichi before. I never trained in it, but I've seen it. I've done a couple classes, and I knew enough that what they were doing was highly advanced, and they looked just so fluid, and they looked just so graceful and yet so highly skilled at what they were doing. And here it is. It's raining, it's cold, and yet they're out there and they're practicing. And something about that just communicated something like, you need to train, you need to get past this, because when you do, life could be a storm around you and you can be grace. You can be calm, you can be clear, you can be confident, and you could be doing your skill. And that skill for you is trading. And so it kind of woke something up in me and kind of just got me to refocus and shift. It created enough of a gap from what I was constantly, in before, which was beating myself up and not confident. It created a space for me to kind of step out of that for a moment. And so I just said, okay, look, I don't have trading in finance, I don't have trading in business, but I do have trading in mindset. I have my meditation practices. I have, this body of knowledge that I have access to, which is quite broad and quite powerful. And I've trained in neuroscience, in particular cognitive performance. So I'm going to use these tools. I'm going to use the skill set that I already have. And I'm going to take my experiences from martial arts, and I'm going to take my experiences from playing soccer for 18 years, or what the world calls football. And I'm going to take all the skills that I have, and I'm going to put it into this. I felt like I had to do this. I felt like I had to trade. I had to get past this, that quitting wasn't an option, that failure wasn't an option, and that I could transform the situation, that I had enough to be able to do this. And so I started to do that, and within a couple weeks, trading shifted. And was it anything near what I was doing before? No, but it was a break away from the drawdown, and the account was slowly gaining again. And it just made me realize how important mindset is, how important it is to train, and how much more I need to develop my skills. And so after a few months of that, I applied for a job to be a broker at FXCM. And the day after the interview, they called me and said, yeah, we want to hire you and we'll fly you out to New York. Can you go next week? And so I said, yeah, I'll start packing right now. And that was it. And so lo and behold, a few days later, I was out on Wall Street training as a broker for FXCM to be a currency broker. And that kind of started, my institutional experience from there.
So what about consistent profitability? What was your biggest challenge? You talked about how, how you got started and how you built up your account. Now, a lot of people challenge with getting consistently profitable. Can you talk about how you overcame your challenge for that? Tell us that story.
Yeah, great question. It's important to define consistently profitable. I don't look at that as a day-to-day thing or a week-to-week. I look at that as over a long period of time, meaning that I can lose 2, 3, or 6 months on the year, but yet still be profitable on the year. And so to me, to be consistently profitable means to be consistently in the positive at the end of the year on a year-on-year basis. And over a long enough time, you're probably going to have maybe a year or two of losses. Some of the greatest hedge funds, of all time have had some losing years and yet still have amazing returns. So we have to define what that is. And I define that as being in the positive and profitable at the end of the year from where you started, having a bigger account than when you ended at the end of the year, and repeating that year after year with a high degree of consistency. So the individual fluctuations, the day-to-day, week-to-week really isn't something I think about too much. I could have 5, 8, 10, 12 losers in a row, and I'm still going to hammer the markets. I'm still going to attack the markets as long as I haven't tripped any risk profiles. So for me, consistently profitable is not something which I think a lot of beginning traders struggle with. They look at it on such a trade-by-trade basis or a day-by-day basis, and you have to kind of take a much bigger picture from that. Otherwise, you'll just get too caught up in the roller coaster of that. So that's kind of how I define it. In terms of what was the big shift for me, there was 2 major shifts. The first was really starting to understand risk management, understanding the risk of ruin, which is the mathematics behind, hey, what is your mathematical probability of blowing up this account or not? So that was the first thing, was really understanding how to control risk, how to understand risk and define risk, because there are many ways we can define risk. But the most important thing is that it really came down to mindset. I could have the best risk profile management system in the world, but if I'm not executing that, then that thing is completely useless to me, or I'm not leveraging the full strength of this. I'm only getting a partial strength of it. So I learned very early on that consistency in performance only comes with consistency in the mind. If you don't have consistency in your mind and your thinking and your mental execution, there will be no consistency in your trading. And that was something that, I learned after that kind of 6-month massive climb in my account to the drawdown to shortly after recovering, which was that the only way I was able to do that was to have complete consistency in my mind. And it made me realize how important mental execution is, not just execution in, say, pulling the trigger when my system comes up and, says, okay, it's time to go long or time to go short, but also in how I think throughout the day. What mind programs am I running? What am I thinking about? What am I focusing on? What thoughts are going through my mind that support me executing my processes throughout the day? Or what things are going on in my mind when I make a lot of mental errors? So the root of all consistency in trading is not going to be defined by the system. I could throw 100 people into a room and give them an account and have them trade the same system and teach them all the rules and make sure they understand it to the T, and you're going to get 100 different performances. And that's because they all have varying levels of consistency in their mind. And the students of mine who do the best, they either have that when they started or they built consistency in their mindset. And because of that, it shows in their trading. When you look at their equity curves, you see an incredibly disciplined trader. If I was to show you some of the equity curves of some of my students, my top students, you would see you can look at them and be like, wow, this person's incredibly disciplined, because they're always risking the same amount per trade. They are trading their system. You could just tell by the equity curve that they're trading their system well, that their winners are always far bigger than their losers, and that their drawdowns are minimal because they're able to control risk, and they do that through the consistency of their mindset. So the biggest challenge in my mind and in my approach is that you will never hit consistency in your trading performance by a system alone, by a risk management system alone, or by any trading plan. You will only have it when you have consistency in your mind. And that was, something that I realized very early on, and it was something that I realized I had to create a mechanism and a series of mind programs and forms of mental rehearsal and visualization, various techniques that would help to control my mindset and mental processes throughout.
Thank you, Chris. You talked about the Taichi moment. Was there another aha moment in your trading where things just clicked for you?
I can't necessarily define it as one event, and I think if you were to interview a lot of traders, there's always going to be some special moments that stand out, but in reality, it's a lot of little moments that build up to that. And so we tend to over-sensationalize maybe one particular moment, and that, if I could only have that one moment, then everything would turn for me. But nothing in that moment really happens unless all the prior training has been done leading up to that. There are no breakouts in a person's growth in any particular skill unless they've done all the training and the practice along the way. And, I think I was very lucky in the sense of that, I played soccer for 18 years, and although I was a good player, I was never a great player. And when I look back upon it, it was so clear to me. It was mindset. That was the dividing line for me between success and a lot of success, to be decently successful and highly successful. And in my last game that I ever played, my girlfriend was watching, and she was practicing yoga and meditation, and I just started yoga and meditation because of her at that time. And I'd seen how it was changing my mindset. It was changing the way I was thinking about the game. It was changing my motivation for playing the game. It was changing, how I would think while playing the game. And I had played what I would call, about as close to a perfect game as I could possibly play. And it wasn't that my skill level was any higher than it was 6 months ago or a year before, anything like that. If anything, my skill level declined because I wasn't training as much. I was out of college. I was no longer playing competitive soccer. I was just playing, in a club league. And yet, what was the one defining difference was my mindset had changed. And it totally just kind of communicated to me that, you could have a little bit of skill, but a really strong mindset and play and perform exceptionally well. Or you could have a really high level of skill. There are people who have really high levels of skill, but really weak mindsets, and they never perform up to their potential. We call these people underperformers. Or, people who are inconsistent. And that's because their mindset's inconsistent. And so, that kind of spoke to me about how important it was to really train my mind and really train my mindset and to use the tools and the experience that I had. And, while most people, and even today spend most of their time studying charts and entries and strategies and techniques and finding the best entry location, they make everything about the entry. And then, okay, I got to learn about my, best stop loss and take profit, and what technique and how could I learn more advanced techniques and price action. Why people spend so much time on the technical aspects of trading, they spend a very small portion of that time on the mindset. And I realized very early on that people who are successful usually reverse the equations that unsuccessful people are using. So I just took that equation and I reversed it. And luckily for me, it was natural because I was already training in meditation. I was already training in yoga. I was already training in neuroscience. So for me, I just got to do more of what I already loved to do. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of time at the charts, but I was mostly training my mindset. And so for me, it was a lot of little moments that kind of made me realize that I need to reverse the equations of what unsuccessful people are doing. And so instead of spending 90% of my time, on the charts and the strategies and the techniques, I actually reversed that to 90% of the time on my mindset. That's why today when people ask me, like, what trading books do you recommend? I don't have many trading books that I've read. But I have, for every trading book that I have, I probably have 100 books on neuroscience, meditation, mindset, success. And that's how I train, and that's how I study, train pretty much up my whole life.
I absolutely agree with you, Chris. I talk a lot about consistent habits and consistent actions that lead to consistent results. I totally agree, and I think it was for me as well. It was the big shift was around that mental aspect of it, and applying those consistent habits to my mental aspect of trading that help with actually getting results in the account.
Yeah, and you'll notice what you just described is probably if you were to interview 1,000 profitable traders or 1,000 profitable or successful people in any skill-based endeavor. And what's admitted, trading is a skill-based endeavor. It's a mental performance discipline. That if you interview them, all of them are going to be talking about mindset more than anything else. No quarterback's going to say, "Oh, well, I learned this special throwing technique that no other buddy can learn or anything like that, and that's why I'm the best." They're not going to talk about that, but they're going to talk about how they've trained, how they've practiced, and their mindset, and that they shifted more of their weight to that. Most people, when they look at professional athletes, they say like, oh my God, these people are performing at these elite levels. But for every game that an athlete is playing in, they're practicing 3 to 5 times more than that. So for every one game they probably have 3 to 5 plus practice sessions at a minimum, maybe even more. Maybe they play 3 hours like a football player. They play 3.5, maybe 4 hours once a week, but they're practicing 50 hours. They're practicing 10 times the amount that they actually perform. And so that's a reversal of the equation that unsuccessful people aren't doing, is that they put 90% of their time into the pure trading and 10% into actual training. And that's another equation that they got reversed. And so, success to me is formulaic. It's in the brain. It's in the mind. And, that formula is simply reversing the equations of what unsuccessful people are doing. The good thing is there's an abundance of that. And it's very easy to say, okay, what are the equations of what they're doing, and let me reverse that. And does that match up with what successful people are doing? Yes, it does. So the fact that you've noticed it, and that, and how you noticed it, and how important it was, to me that just kind of further validates this kind of approach.
Absolutely. And actually, another thing that I find has been very useful has been the role of mentors.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for yourself, was there a person who had a tremendous impact on you as a trader? And how did this person impact your life?
Yeah, great question. There were three people that I guess you can say that I would call them mentors. None of them were like pure traders in and of themselves. So the first mentor, or the first person who impacted me, was Philip. That was the person who handed me the book. He ended up investing money with me, and we were able to make a lot of profit with that. And just the fact that he kind of had this intuition, he had this feeling about me that like, hey, you can't limit yourself to this. You need to expand your horizons. You need to expand your limits of what you think is possible and what you think you can do, because you can do way more than you think you can. For somebody to communicate that and to share that with you and to really kind of help foster that feeling was a very, poignant experience. And so, in some sense, my trading career is really kind of is because of him. And because of this change in direction that he provided in my life. Life seems to pivot on certain moments. And again, those moments don't happen unless everything is done up to that point in the right way. But, moments like that, where life pivots and can have a huge impact on you, he did. And so that would be the first person. The second person was actually my boss at FXCM. He was, and I'm still friends with him today, and I'll be seeing him. He's now in Hong Kong. I'll be seeing him in a couple months. But there was something about him as a person that I really appreciated. It wasn't just his vast knowledge of the industry that he could communicate to me, and it wasn't just the fact that he kind of constantly challenged me, but he taught me a lot about training, not just training myself, but training others. And he taught me a lot about character. And so it's not that I didn't have certain things or certain characteristics within me, but this was somebody who I could say truly had integrity. And I think if we really are honest with ourselves and we examine, people in our lives or just people that we know, whether they're friends or not, the list of people that we can say that really have integrity is a small list. And his level of integrity and his level of, I guess you can say dignity, had a really important impact upon me. And because of his character and because of that dignity and because of that integrity, he was able to do certain things that, while being lesser skilled at them than people who are really highly skilled with less character could do. And so he had a huge impact upon me as a person and just reminded me of some of the important things in my life and how important it is to, how important character is as a quality in an individual. And then the last person who impacted me was my teacher, who's my current teacher today. I've only had two teachers, in terms of yoga meditation for the last 15 years. And the first one was only for a year, and then she moved out of the country. And this teacher I've been with for the last 14 plus years. She, imagine having a relationship with somebody who not only helps you see the best parts of you, who shows you a more expanded vision of what you could be and what you already are, but also challenges you, takes you well beyond your comfort zone, who's not going to conform to any sort of what you think should happen or ideas about any normal relationship. This person constantly challenges me, and they constantly help me see my weak points and my strengths at the same time. And she's always given me tools to work with that and go beyond that and guide me. She helps me see a better version of myself, and not only helps me see that, but helps me become that, and is never stopping in that process. And all during that time is, probably one of the most important persons in my life. And I can't tell you how grateful I am to have such a person like that in my life and how important that relationship is, because, I see a lot of people out there who are mentors, and the ones that I've seen that are generally the best mentors are also the student as well. I see a lot of mentors who are not students. They are just the mentor. And there's no part of them that's being taken to task, that's being challenged, that's being forced to see things outside of their own perspective. And I think that gives me a unique perspective on how to train students, because I'm not just a mentor, I'm a teacher, I'm a student as well. I'm going through some of the same things they are, just in a completely different context. And that, because I'm going through these processes on a very different level and a very different scope, it really helps me to understand and offer things that most other mentors cannot. And so a lot of people in the trading world have a thing about, mentors, and they must be scam artists, and why would they be doing that if they could make more money trading? And it's totally a valid question. It's totally true, but it's also kind of a selfish way to look at it. They look at it as, well, if they probably hate their job. They don't like it. They're not doing what they love. And so if they could be making a lot more money in trading, and you can always make more money in trading than you can in teaching, that will always be true. The bottom line is, why would you be doing it? Why would you do something if this makes you more money and this makes you less money? Well, if money was the most important driving factor of my life, then I'd probably be working for Goldman Sachs. I'd probably be doing mergers and acquisitions where we do $1 billion merger and I get 2% of that. Do the numbers. I can do 3 of those every 2 years, and I'm making more money than I am in trading. But money's not the driving factor in my life. It's not. I don't orbit around that, and I don't make that the kind of guiding star that I always kind of set my compass to for all decisions. So, that's them applying their mindset to me, and it's just not how it works. There are some people who are billionaires, and yet they still teach, and they still train. They're some of the most successful athletes in the world, and they still train. So they don't apply that argument to them, so I don't know why it gets applied to in trading. And so I think people need to understand how important it is to have someone who can guide you along the process, who can reflect things back to you outside of your own perspective, and who can help you see a better version of yourself. And to me, that's what a mentor does. And I've been very lucky to have some of those people in my life, and without them, I can't even imagine me being where I am today. I can only imagine being a fraction of where I am today, and covered a much shorter distance than I could have without them. So I don't have that attitude around mentors. I never have. You'll even notice in certain cultures, it's much more cultural. It's like a cultural thing that they accept mentors and people who are, people who can teach you along the way. And so I have no problem with that. I'll probably be working with mentors and teachers and people who will train me to the day I die.
Yeah, actually, I believe it is really important to have mentors, because mentors can cut down the time that you waste on things.
Huge.
Cut down your learning curve in half.
Huge.
And they can, a lot of times they can keep you from self-destructing.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned there that's really a brilliant insight is time. So, there's this common argument. It's really kind of a naive argument that, everything you can learn out there is on the internet for free. And it's like, okay, even if that were true, I'm pretty sure my experience and all my experience and everything I've learned isn't out there isn't out there on the internet for free. But let's just say it is. Let's just go with that for a second there. The fact that I have spent 15 years accumulating this experience and can condense it down to, a handful of videos and say, look, skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, skip this, go for this. If somebody was to actually try and get all that information for free, how long is it going to take them to get it? It's going to probably take you several years. And you say, okay, great. Well, I've saved my money. I didn't pay the $500 for that course to do it. Okay, great, but you spent 2 years trying to get that information when you could have spent $500 getting that in a punch of a button. And you could have, shortened your learning curve by doing that. We got to look at our learning process as not just how much it costs, but how much in terms of dollars, but how much it costs in terms of time. I make X dollars per hour on average. So if I read a book and the book costs me $20, and that book is going to give me maybe $10,000 worth of knowledge, but it took me more than 20 hours to do it, I'm actually at a net loss unless that thing can give me ongoing returns. So we have to look at our training process and say, okay, yeah, I can read all these books and get all this information for free. How long is it going to take me to read that book? I'm a voracious reader. I read on average 1 to 2 books a week, which is well above the average. So let's just say somebody keeps up with my pace at 1 book a week. Okay, great. Maybe it takes you 50 books to get all this knowledge. So you're talking 52 weeks to do that. How many hours is that? Let's talk a 3,000-hour work year. Great. You just spent 3,000 hours at whatever $X per rate you have. That's something you could have gotten for $500. So I don't know about you, but I can't control the amount of time that I'm here. I don't know how much I got. I know that my time is constantly getting shorter and shorter. And so I'm looking at my time and saying, look, is this the most efficient way to use my time? Yes. A mentor is going to increase my learning curve. It doesn't matter whether they are the master trader of the entire universe or somebody who's a pretty good trader. They're going to shorten my learning curve. And so, I don't have to train with somebody who is the best trader in the world. I just have to train with somebody who's better than me, who can help take me to the next level. Maybe someday I will pass them, then I'll find the next person on the list. So
yeah, and actually, I was going to say that's a misconception as well, because people think that sometimes to be a mentor you have to be like an exceptional trader yourself. But if you look at the best, for example, Tiger Woods, he was at the top of his game for years upon years. Mm-hmm. His mentor was not better than him, mm-hmm. right? It's the outside perspective that you get, by somebody looking in who is good at what they do, but they don't have to be exceptional. But they can provide that outside perspective that helps you improve your game.
Correct.
And
you mentioned something that's very insightful, and I'm glad you mentioned it, which is outside perspective. If we never go outside our own perspective, we're just getting more of what we already have, which is our own perspective. And if our own perspective was enough right now to make us a successful trader, we would be there. We would be there. It would just be there. It would just be happening right now. If the way our brains were wired right now was enough to make us a consistently profitable trader, we would be doing that. Our brains are going to execute, electrical signals which lead to thoughts and neural networks and actions that we're most right now hardwired to do. That wiring can change. We have neuroplasticity. The brain can change its wiring and neural networks and structure. But it's going to activate the most dominant networks most of the time. So if those dominant networks you already have were enough, you would be there. But you're not. If somebody's not, well then what do you have to do? You have to go outside your perspective. Otherwise you're just going to be repeating the same. You're just going to get more of what you already have. So this is, I'm so glad you mentioned that outside perspective, because it's kind of a naive idea out there that people think you don't need that and that they can do it all on their own and that they have the wiring as is. You don't have the wiring as is. Our brains aren't wired to be traders. Nobody has the brain wired to be a trader unless they grew up in a family and they were hearing that from day one. So, mentors provide that. And again, they don't have to be master trader of the entire galaxy. They don't have to be the absolute best. And sometimes the best in those fields are really horrible trainers. They're really horrible mentors. Isaiah Thomas, Hall of Fame basketball player, one of the best basketball players of his generation, has completely failed as a coach wherever he's gone. There are many instances of great players trying to become coaches and it doesn't work. There are many instances of decent players, good players who became great coaches, some of the best in history. Someone who's good at the skill and good as a mentor is not a common thing. I wouldn't say it's rare, but it's not common. And so, I feel lucky that I have both skill sets. Which one is better? I don't know. I need people who are better than me to evaluate that. But, I just feel very lucky that I have a little bit of both. And so I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's such a misunderstanding about the learning process there. And, if somebody truly believes all those things, about you can get all the information for free and you can do this and you don't need outside perspective and you don't need to train, you don't need a mentor, fine. Go that path and come back to me in 10 years and let me know where you are. And I'm willing to bet that if we take 10,000 people and put them on that path, and then we take 10,000 people that I work with, that I'm going to have a much higher percentage of people who are successful. And the numbers aren't even going to be close. That my top performer is going to outperform anyone in that field. To me, it's a no-brainer.
Also I find in like organizations and big organizations and that are doing really well, they place a huge amount of emphasis on mentoring relationships. Like they always tell you to go find mentors, and it's just the amount of emphasis on mentoring is huge. Yeah, it's great. So I think it applies to all fields across the, any kind of skill set.
Any skill-based endeavor, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So we were talking about, you mentioned you read a lot of books. So is there a book or resource that you would recommend that you have found really helpful you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh, gosh, great question. Hold on, let me, somehow I forgot about that one, but hold on, I'm opening up my Kindle right now. There's a couple books that if I was to recommend a trading book to anybody, an actual trading book, there's one that is kind of not your typical trading book. It's called The Hour Between the Dog and Wolf. It's by Jack Coates. He's a trader who became a neuroscientist. So the great thing is he has two, perspectives on trading. He was an institutional trader and he became a neuroscientist. And his specialty was in cognitive performance. And so that was a really, I guess you can say, it's probably my favorite trading book because he talks about what your brain and central nervous system is going through and your body's going through while you're trading at the highest level. And even whether it's the highest level or your current level, it's still the same thing. And he really kind of opens up the biology and the science behind it so that people can understand in a very simple way how important just the brain is wired, the body's chemistry, our thoughts, our nervous system, how all that interact while we're trading, how our brains are not wired to be traders, and how we have to go against that evolutionary tendency. And it's just it's a beautiful and fascinating book, and I think anybody who reads that will have a completely different perspective on trading in and of itself. So that would be one recommendation in terms of a resource that I found, is very helpful. Another one is Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Daniel Amen. He talks about, he did 80,000 spec graphs, which is a way to analyze the activity in the regions of activity in your brain and how that's actually translating into your behavior, personality, and success or failure. And, that is a really great resource for understanding how much the brain can and will affect performance in everything we do in life, and how it's the most important real estate, and how it's super critical that we have a healthy brain and constantly train our brain to be in the most optimal state possible. So that would be one that I'd recommend. I actually just did an article on the 8 resources for your mindset, brain, and meditation on my website, so people can check that out. But there's some really great resources on that I would recommend the listeners and the members to explore.
I'll link to that. I do have that article, Chris, so I'll link to that article as well in the show notes.
Great.
All right. So now we are coming towards the close of the interview. So if you could do this all over again, knowing all that you know today, what would you do differently?
I have 2 responses to that, which is, the first is, I like who I am today, and I like who I am now, and I like what I'm doing. I'm incredibly passionate about it. There's a part of me that feels that if I was to change anything in that I would be a completely different person who I am today. And I like where I am right now, and I like where I'm going, and I feel really grateful for where I am and appreciate all the people in my life. So there's a part of me that says, if I was to do it all over again, what would I do differently? I wouldn't do anything different because I like this place right now. And I feel like I have clear skies ahead of me. I feel like my horizon is bright. We're going to, myself, my company, my trading, everything is going to be evolving into new levels of things and constantly taking things to the next level. So I like that. And the people I have in my life, I'm so grateful for them. I appreciate them, my partner, my teacher, my friends, my work, co-employees or co-workers, my students. I'm super appreciative of them. So there's a part of me that says I wouldn't change anything. If, however, there was a way to do something over and it could make a better version of me, maybe perhaps be further along my path than where I am right now, what I would do differently is I would train in all the methods I created in my Advanced Trader's Mindset course. These are all the things that I've spent the last 20 years studying, either with neuroscience, cognitive performance, or meditation and trading. And I condensed them all into one course. And these were all the things that I spent so many hours and lost, 6 figures of my own personal, wealth and fortune losing in the markets to discover these things. And so for me, if I could have done it all over again, I would train intensely in these methods from the beginning before I really tackled the markets. There's a great scene from the movie Braveheart where it's early on in the movie when he's a young boy and he lost his father. And his uncle, who takes care of him, is talking with him. And young William Wallace sees the sword and he picks it up and he feels something wrong. He wants to use this, kind of as his rebellion against the English for the crimes that they committed against his family and his people. And the uncle says something very interesting in that moment. He says, "Oh, you want to learn how to use this?" And he picks up the sword and he says, "First learn how to use this." And he touches him on the head. And he says, "Then I'll teach you how to use this." And he picks up the sword. And for me, that's kind of, for me, I think that was, if I could train anybody in any skill-based endeavor, I would teach them mindset first. I would teach them how to think. I would teach them how to learn to use their mind. And everything that I've learned over the last 20 years, I would condense it all and try and teach them all that. And then I would teach them the primary skill. Because once I teach them those things, I feel like there's nothing that they couldn't go into their life and be successful at. I feel like the tools that I have now, if you were to pick me up and take me and put me into another field, if it was, even if I wasn't passionate about it, I'd still be successful. I wouldn't be as successful as I am with what I'm doing now because I'm super passionate about what I do. I love what I do. I love everything that I do. But I would still be successful because these mindset techniques, these methodologies, these strategies, these ways of training your mind to think successfully work. And they can work in any field. I literally have people coming out of this course saying, "Wow, I want to teach this to my kids. Would you recommend that?" I have people applying this to their work, applying this to everything that they do. And everybody's just completely blown away by it. And so if I could have done anything over again, it would be to condense that, everything that I put into that course and train in that first until that was mastered. And then I would really tackle the markets. So that would be how I would do things differently if I could.
Okay, in closing, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach you?
Great question. So I have a website, 2ndSkiesForex.com, where I have all kinds of free articles and videos on strategies and mindset and, and trading. So all kinds of free content on there, a free beginner's course for those who are new and more advanced stuff for people who are further along. So that would be the best portal and method to do that, would be my website, 2ndSkiesForex.com. You can also email me, chris@2ndSkiesForex.com. You're also welcome to engage. Some people prefer social media, so you're welcome to check out my Twitter account. I'm decently active on that, and it's a nice little engagement there. Facebook as well, so people can find that all under 2ndSkiesForex. So those are the best ways to get in touch with me. Ask questions, email me directly, and go from there. But generally, people who interact with the site, they find it an incredible resource, and they find it helps change the way they think, trade, and perform. And that's what we do. That's the goal of 2nd Skies, is to change the way people think, trade, and perform. And so that's what I've dedicated my life to, and that's what I do. I'm not just teaching people how to trade. I'm teaching them how to think and perform successfully. And so if people are interested in that, then come visit me on my site, and that's what I can teach you.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us and sharing your insights with us today. We really appreciate that.
It was a pleasure, and thanks for the interview and some great questions. And I'll look forward to hearing from you and working with you in the future.
Sounds great. Thank you.
We've been talking to Chris Capre, who has given us some great tips on how to become a successful Forex trader. Be sure to check out his contact details in the show notes and visit his website for some more great tips on both the mental and technical aspects of trading. That's it for today. If you like what you heard on the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It will help the show and its ranking and allow us to bring some more great content to you. Until next time, this is Raman Gill.
If you want consistency in your trading, we invite you to join our daily market analysis calls, where we provide the levels to find the best entries and targets on an intraday basis. For a 1-week free trial, please visit www.tradingwithvenus.com. Thanks for joining us today. With much gratitude, your show host, Raman Gill.